4. When we talk about trauma, one of the first things we have to understand is that the brain is not designed to make you happy. It's designed to keep you alive. 4. That's its primary function. Survival always overrides everything else. And when something traumatic happens, 4. The brain goes into emergency mode. It flips the switch to fight, flight, or freeze. Now, in that moment, that's actually an incredible gift. 4. It's the body doing exactly what it was built to do. Your heart rate spikes, adrenaline floods your system, your senses sharpen. 4. You're not thinking about next week's to-do list or whether people like you. You're thinking only about getting through the next 5 seconds. 4. The problem is not the response itself. The problem is what happens afterward. The trauma embeds itself into the wiring of the nervous system. 4. The brain essentially takes a snapshot of that danger and says, "This is how we'll keep you safe from now on." And suddenly, you're not living in the present anymore. You're living through the filter of the past. Even when the threat is gone, your brain doesn't update the program. 4. It keeps running the survival code long after the danger has disappeared. This is where people get stuck. 4. The very mechanism that was designed to protect you becomes the mechanism that holds you hostage. Think of it like an alarm system in a house. If a burglar breaks in, 4, you want that alarm screaming at full volume. But imagine the alarm never shuts off. Imagine you're trying to sleep, trying to cook dinner, trying to have a conversation with someone you love, and that alarm just keeps blaring. 4. That's what trauma does in the brain. It locks the survival system in the on position. And here's the deeper layer. 4. The brain isn't just reacting to external threats, it's reacting to internal ones as well. Your own thoughts, your own memories. 4. Even the sensation in your body can trigger the same alarm bells. You think about something painful, or you feel a certain tightness in your chest. 4. And instantly your brain says, "Here we go again, the danger is back." But it's not back, it's just a memory, just a sensation. Or yet the survival wiring doesn't know the difference. It treats all of it as if the trauma is happening right now. This is why so many people feel like they're reliving their trauma over and over, even if the event itself is long gone. 4. The brain hasn't released them because it believes it's protecting them. And here's the cruel trick: when the brain stays locked in survival mode, 4, it shuts down higher functions, things like rational decision, making, creativity, even the ability to connect deeply with others. The prefrontal cortex, 4, the part of you that thinks long term, that can plan, that can weigh options, gets hijacked, and so life starts to shrink. The person stops taking risks, 4, stops reaching out, stops dreaming, not because they're weak or broken, but because their brain has been tricked into believing the safest option is to stay small, or stay hidden, stay stuck. And yet, in a strange way, there's a kind of wisdom in this system. 4. It reveals something about the nature of the human condition, that survival is primal but freedom is chosen. The brain will always default to survival. 4. It will always choose the familiar pain over the unfamiliar possibility. It doesn't care if you're fulfilled, if you're expanding, 4, if you're living your purpose. That's not its job. Its job is to keep you breathing, which means the responsibility to move beyond trauma, to retrain the brain, or falls to us. It requires awareness, intentional practice, and sometimes help from others. So the question isn't whether your brain is wired for survival. It is. 4. The real question is, are you willing to take back the controls and remind your brain that survival is not the same thing as living? That's the moment the shift begins. Perfect? Let's keep the flow consistent and build out key point 2 into a 600-word segment that naturally follows from the survival wiring you've already introduced. 4. I'll keep the same Tony Robbins inspired energy authoritative, yet clear and accessible, with depth that feels both psychological and philosophical. Once the survival system has been activated, the next trick trauma plays is in how it alters memory and perception. You see, the human brain is not a perfect recording device. It doesn't store experiences the way a camera captures an image. Memories are not objective, they're living. 4. Breathing processes. Every time you recall something, your brain is reconstructing it, layering it with emotion, with meaning, with fragments of past experiences. 4. And trauma interferes with that reconstruction in a very specific way. Under normal circumstances, your hippocampus, 4, the part of the brain responsible for contextualizing memory, acts like a filing system. It takes an event, places it in time and space, and says, "This happened back then in that place, or with those people." It allows you to know the difference between something that happened years ago and something that's happening now. But when trauma hits, 4. The hippocampus goes offline. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, takes over. Instead of a neatly filed memory, you get raw fragments, sensations, images, sounds, emotions that aren't properly anchored in the past. That's why people say trauma feels like it's still happening. Because neurologically, for in some sense it is, the memory has not been integrated into the timeline of your life. Instead, for it gets stored as a kind of floating now, ready to be triggered at any moment. You hear a sound, smell a certain scent, or someone uses a tone of voice that's even vaguely similar to what you experienced, and suddenly you're there again. For your body reacts as if the threat has returned, even when you're perfectly safe. And here's where the distortion deepens when the brain is replaying trauma. For perception narrows, it filters reality through the lens of fear. Imagine putting on a pair of glasses that only highlight danger. Everywhere you look, for you see potential threats, a neutral face becomes suspicious, a closed door feels ominous. Even silence can feel threatening. Because the brain is searching for danger in every corner. The world stops being a place of possibilities and starts being a place of hazards. This is why trauma survivors often struggle with trust, with intimacy, with taking chances. It's not because they don't want to live fully. It's because their perception has been hijacked. The brain is saying, if it happened once, it can happen again. Stay alert, stay guarded. And so every new moment is contaminated by the shadow of the old one. Now, philosophically, this tells us something profound about the nature of suffering. It's not just the event itself that hurts us. It's the way our minds carry it forward. Trauma tricks us into confusing memory with reality. It convinces us that the past has the right to dictate the present. And when you live inside that illusion, your choices shrink, you stop seeing the open door right in front of you because your brain is too busy scanning for threats behind you. But here's the good news. Just as the brain can be conditioned to stay stuck, it can also be retrained to see clearly again. Neuroplasticity means these memory loops are not fixed. With the right tools, therapy, mindfulness, body work, you can teach the brain to refile the memory properly to say, yes, that happened, but it's over. It's not happening now. And when that shift occurs, perception begins to expand again. You start to see not only what could go wrong, but also what could go right. So the challenge is this: are you willing to confront the tricks your brain is playing on you? To look at the memories without letting them define the present moment. Because until you do, your past will always be the loudest voice in the room. And the truth is, your future deserves to speak louder. Got it? Let's build key point 3 into a seamless 600-word segment that continues the flow from survival wiring and distorted memory. I'll keep the voice authoritative yet relatable, with that Tony Robbins style energy, direct, intellectually grounded, but emotionally compelling. So, survival wiring is the first trap and distorted memory is the second. And then the third trick trauma plays is even more deceptive. It convinces us that staying small, staying numb, or staying hidden is safer than living fully. It's the illusion of control. When you've been hurt, your brain builds walls. It tells you, don't go there. Don't open up. Don't take that risk. And at first, those walls feel protective. They keep out the chaos. They keep out the unknown. They keep out the possibility of getting hurt again. That withdrawal, that shutting down, is the brain's way of creating a bubble of control in a world that once felt uncontrollable. But here's the trap. What begins as self-protection quickly turns into self-imprisonment. Numbing might quiet the pain for a while, but it also numbs joy. Avoidance might shield you from reminders of the trauma, but it also shuts you off from experiences that could heal you. Isolation might feel like safety, but it robs you of the connection that your nervous system desperately needs to regulate and recover. The brain doesn't see this, though, it believes it's making the safest choice. It confuses stillness with safety, withdrawal with protection, control with freedom. But that's the illusion. True safety doesn't come from shrinking your life down to the smallest possible circle. True safety comes from expanding into your full humanity again. Risking. 4. Connecting and allowing yourself to be seen. Think about it this way: when a child touches a hot stove, they learn not to touch it again. That's wisdom. That's experience shaping behavior. But trauma magnifies that learning to an extreme. Instead of saying, don't touch the stove, it says, don't go in the kitchen, don't cook, don't eat, maybe don't even light a candle. Because fire in any form could burn you. What starts as protection turns into avoidance of life itself. And when avoidance takes over, Your world becomes smaller and smaller until you're no longer living, you're just existing. 4. This is why so many people feel trapped in patterns they can't explain. They're not lazy, they're not weak, they're not broken. They're following the false logic of a brain that equates safety with restriction. Trauma whispers, if you don't try, you can't fail. If you don't love, 4, you can't be hurt. If you don't move, you can't fall. And for a while, that logic feels comforting. But in the long run, it's suffocating. Philosophically, 4, this raises a profound question about the human condition. Do we prefer the comfort of certainty, even if it's painful, over the uncertainty of growth? Most of us, 4, unconsciously, will choose the familiar prison over the unknown freedom. Because at least in the prison, we know the walls. We know the limits. 4. And our brains trick us into believing that familiarity is safer than possibility. But here's the paradox. 4. The very thing the brain tells you is protecting you is the thing keeping you stuck. The only real safety is found on the other side of risk, on the other side of stepping back into the fullness of life. And that doesn't mean recklessness. 4. It doesn't mean ignoring your wounds or forcing yourself to just get over it. It means slowly, intentionally, reclaiming the spaces trauma told you to avoid. 4. It means testing the walls and realizing most of them aren't real. They're just habits of protection that no longer serve you. So the question becomes, 4. Are you living inside a fortress that protects you, or inside a prison that limits you? Because the walls may feel the same, but the difference is everything. 4. And sometimes the greatest act of courage is to walk out of the prison you built for yourself, and remember you were never meant to live behind bars. All right, 4, let's bring this full circle with a 600-word expansion of key point 4. This will carry the same Tony Robbins style energy. Authoritative, clear, and deeply human, and flow seamlessly from the first 3 points toward a closing sense of empowerment and possibility. 4. If the brain's survival wiring is the first trap, if distorted memory is the second, and if the illusion of control is the third, then the final piece, the way forward, is understanding that the brain is not fixed. It is adaptable. It is rewritable. And this is where the hope lies. 4. Trauma tricks the brain into believing that the old program is permanent. But neuroscience shows us something radically different. The brain has neuroplasticity. 4. The ability to form new connections, new patterns, new realities. Think about that for a moment. 4. The very organ that held you captive is also the organ that can set you free. That's not poetry, that's biology. Every thought you think, 4. Every breath you take with awareness, every time you challenge the old pattern, you're reshaping neural pathways. 4. You're literally carving a new map inside your head. And with consistent practice, that map starts to replace the old one. Now, this is not easy work. For trauma healing is not about erasing the past or pretending it didn't happen. 4. It's about teaching the brain to stop reacting to the past as if it's still happening. It's about shifting from a state of reactivity into a state of choice. 4. And that shift doesn't happen through willpower alone. It happens through tools, practices, and connection. Therapy, for example, 4, can help you process and integrate those fragmented memories so they finally get filed where they belong, in the past. Mindfulness and meditation train the brain to notice the difference between memory and reality, to pause before reacting, to create a gap where freedom can lie. 4. Body-based approaches, breathwork, somatic experiencing, movement, retrain the nervous system to release stored survival energy instead of recycling it. 4. Even simple practices like grounding, gratitude, or learning to regulate your breathing begin to tell the brain a new story. You are safe now. You can live, or not just survive. And then there's connection. This is critical, because trauma isolates. It convinces you that you're alone, that nobody understands, 4, that nobody can be trusted. But neuroscience again tells us the opposite. Healing happens in relationship. When you feel seen, 4, when someone else bears witness without judgment, your nervous system learns safety through connection. Your brain rewires not just through your own effort, 4, but through the resonance of another human being. Philosophically, this is profound. It means that freedom is not just an individual pursuit, it's relational. 4, it's about rediscovering yourself in the presence of others, allowing your nervous system to mirror safety, trust, and love. And in that process, 4, you reclaim not only your life but your humanity. The question then is not whether healing is possible, it is. 4. The real question is whether you will take the steps. Will you challenge the tricks your brain has been playing on you? Will you dare to step into the unknown? 4. To practice, to stumble, to try again? Because neuroplasticity is not instant, it's a practice. Every time you interrupt an old pattern, you strengthen a new one. 4. Every time you breathe into fear, instead of running from it, you're telling your brain, I'm not in danger, I'm alive. I'm here. 4. I choose this moment. That's the power you have. Trauma may have written the opening chapters of your story, but it doesn't have to write the ending. The brain can be tricked into staying stuck, yes, but it can also be trained into freedom, and freedom ultimately is not about erasing your past. 4. It's about reclaiming your future. So the choice is yours. Will you keep repeating the survival script, or will you write a new one? 4. Because the truth is simple, your brain can keep you alive, but only you can choose to fully live.